Hello, and welcome to the Spectrum for Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. Today, we're looking at 7 stories that connect policy, courts, technology, privacy, travel, and household costs. The goal here is simple. We're not chasing outrage. We're looking for what is confirmed, what is still unclear, what gets lost in the spin of the news coverage, and how these stories show up in our everyday life. So let's get started. It's not working. There we go. Apparently, the wrong slide got stuck. Let's get started. So, hi, my name is Jared Urain, and this is the Spectrum. This is the Spectrum, and we've got our first story coming up. We've got 7 stories that we're going to cover tonight. Sorry for the technical. I'm still ironing out all of the details on this, especially using the live stream. But the goal here, as I mentioned before, is the focus on the facts, and our goal is to be able to drive home the human impact as to why these stories matter. Not just to get connected to the hype or to really kind of put other systems down. Everyone has an opinion and their own side of things. Our goal here is really to let's cross the divide and really focus on what really matters when it comes to these stories and how they can have an impact on us individually. So let's get started. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported today that consumer prices rose 0.6% in April. Over the past 12 months, prices are up 3.8%. Energy was a major part of the increase. Energy prices rose 3.8% in April and accounted for more than 40% of the monthly rise. Shelter and food were up. Core inflation, which leaves out food and energy, rose 0.4% for the month. The actual news here is that the inflation is not just a market number, it's a household planning problem. Gas, rent, groceries, travel, credit cards, car loans, and mortgages all connect back to this metric. Now, if you're getting this story from Market First coverage, you're going to hear mostly about the Federal Reserve and interest rates. That definitely matters. But it can miss the ordinary household questions, like what bill changed first, and what do you have to cover? What do you have to give up in order to cover it? See, if you're getting this information, let's say from the right of center coverage, you might hear it framed mostly as a failure of current economic leadership. That could leave out global energy shocks, business pricing, supply chains, and household costs. Whereas if you're getting this message from the left of center coverage, you might hear more about corporate pricing or outside shocks. And that could leave out the frustration of families who are not debating theories. They're looking at receipts. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? Well, the concern here is that inflation turns policy language into daily trade-offs. A higher gas bill can mean fewer errands, skipped visits, delayed repairs, even a smaller grocery cart. Renters and people with variable debt feel this through monthly payments that do not wait for wages to catch up. And the people least able to absorb another increase, they're often the people with the least control over prices, housing, transportation, or schedules. So why does this matter? How should we respond? Well, we can keep an eye on energy prices and shelter costs, but also to what the Federal Reserve does next. If inflation keeps running hot, the Fed has less room to cut rates, and borrowing relief gets pushed further away. Whereas if energy cools and core prices ease, rate relief becomes a little easier to discuss. But even then, families may need months to actually feel it. Now, if hiring slows while prices stay high, households get squeezed from both directions. So the practical question is this: what part of your budget changed first? And what did you have to give up to cover it? If this is showing up in your grocery bill, in your commute, in your rent, or even your credit card balance, please share your experience in the comments or bring it to the live conversation. We're going live every day. Inflation is a national number, but it is certainly lived one receipt at a time. The House Republicans released a major tax and spending package today that includes at least $880 billion in cuts, largely aimed at Medicaid. Republicans say the plan is about reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. They're also proposing new work and eligibility requirements. Democrats warn that millions of people could lose health coverage. And the Associated Press reports that the preliminary estate from nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found that the proposals could reduce the number of insured people by 8.6 million over a decade. The actual news here is not just whether Medicaid spending goes down. It's how the savings are created, who has to prove eligibility, how often they have to prove it, and what happens when paperwork is late, or how many people fall through the administrative cracks even if they technically still qualify. If you get this story from the right of center sources, you may hear it framed as stopping fraud or enforcing work or even protecting taxpayers. Those are real public concerns. But that framing can distract from the moral concern that eligible people may still lose care because of paperwork barriers, disability, caregiving responsibilities, unstable work schedules, or even transportation problems. What about energy delays? If you're getting this message, let's say from the left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as a coverage loss crisis or a tax cut trade-off. Yeah, that is also part of the story, but it can underplay legitimate public concern about program integrity and whether public benefits are being administered fairly. So what's the human impact beyond the spin? Well, the concern here is that healthcare cut can show up as lost coverage, delayed care, and a new paperwork burden for people with the fewest spare hours. A low-income parent may remain eligible, but still miss a shift to collect documents, to travel to an office or call an agency, or even fix a notice that arrived late. A disabled person or a caregiver may lose time and energy proving something the system already should know. That can mean delayed medication, missed appointments, or interrupted home care. And the people making the rules are not usually the people sitting on hold, missing a paycheck, or trying to keep coverage active while life is already unstable. So, what can we confirm? Well, we know that, sorry about that. Let's pull this up. We know that Republicans have released legislation that includes a major Medicaid-related reduction as part of a broader package. The Republicans are presenting the change as waste, fraud, abuse, and work requirement eligibility. Democrats are warning millions of people may lose health coverage. The AP has reported a preliminary CBO estimate showing a few million insurers would be affected over a decade with these proposals. What's not confirmed, though? The final legislative language is not settled. It's not yet confirmed how many people would lose coverage over any final version. State-by-state implementation details are really unclear, and it's also not clear whether moderate Republicans will force change or whether the CBO score will shift negotiations. It's not yet clear how many people would lose coverage because they are ineligible versus because they cannot complete the new paperwork or verification. So why does all of this matter? Well, we can pay attention to the CBO score. We can also watch how moderate Republicans are responding. Watch the governors and the state Medicaid agencies and how they respond as well. Hospitals, nursing homes, rural clinics, county offices, all of those will also have some sort of response and impact. We can listen to what their language is. If moderate Republicans push back, or if the CBO update shows high coverage losses, total cuts might be reduced. And that would create funding uncertainty for the broader tax package. If the bill keeps strict eligibility and work rules, the savings may come partly from people losing coverage because they cannot navigate the process. If states have to implement new requirements quickly, the burden shifts to the call centers, the county offices, the clinics, and the families. So the practical question here is this: are lawmakers cutting waste, or are they making it harder for eligible people to get care? If Medicaid, disability care, caregiving, nursing home care, or rural health access affects your family, please share what that process actually looks like for those of us out here. Drop it in the comments or bring it to life in the live conversation. I am running this live. Love to hear your feedback. Really, the policy debate here is abstract until the people like you who are living day to day are heard. The Supreme Court is leaving current access to mifepristone in place until at least Thursday. Justice Samuel Alito's order prevents a lower court restriction from taking effect immediately. For now, patients can continue obtaining the medication through pharmacies by mail without an in-person doctor visit. But this is temporary. It's not a final ruling, and that distinction matters. The actual news is that access remains in place now, but the deadline is short. The next order could affect mail access, pharmacy access, telehealth, and whether patients need in-person visits. If you're getting this information from the right of center sources, you might hear it framed as a legal fight over FDA authority or state power and abortion restrictions. And that can distract from the immediate patient care question, such as what happens to someone who has an appointment or a prescription or even medication plans this week. If you're getting it from the other side of the spectrum, left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as an attack on reproductive rights. And that can underplay the legal mechanics of emergency orders and what is actually decided versus what is still pending. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the Supreme Court extended mifepristone access until Thursday. And the order keeps pharmacies and mail access in place. The order does block the lower court restriction, taking effect immediately. What is not confirmed is that the Supreme Court has not issued a final merits decision. And it's also unclear if the court will extend the pause, narrow access, or allow restrictions to take effect. It's unclear how quickly pharmacies, providers, and patients would have to change practices if restrictions are allowed, as well as what litigation will further reshape medication abortion access. So what is the human impact beyond this spin? The concern here is that legal uncertainty can turn medical care into a race against deadlines. A patient may have to rearrange childcare or transportation, time off work, or a pharmacy pickup because a court order could change access within days. A provider or pharmacist may have to pause, verify, or reroute care while trying not to violate shifting rules. The cost is not only a political conflict. It's time, it's privacy, stress, the risk that care is delayed because the legal ground moves underneath people. So why does this matter, and how can we respond? Well, we can watch the court's next order before Thursday and pay attention to whether the ruling affects mail access, pharmacy access, telehealth, or in-person visit requirements. We can also watch how quickly providers and pharmacies update their instructions if access changes. If the court extends the pause, current access continues while the larger legal fight moves forward. If the court allows restrictions to take effect, patients may face fewer access points, more travel, and more scheduling pressure. If the court narrows the lower court ruling, the practical effects may vary by state, provider, and pharmacy. The practical question here is whether medical access can remain clear enough for patients and providers to act safely. How about you? If this affects your care, your clinic, or your pharmacy, or maybe someone in your family, we would love to know how this uncertainty looks like in real life. This legal debate is national, but the scheduling problem, that's personal. Missouri's highest court was set to hear a challenge today to a new congressional map. At the same time, Louisiana and South Carolina lawmakers are considering whether to join other Republican-led states in redrawing U.S. House districts before the midterms. Missouri was the second Republican state after Texas to respond to President Trump's call for new maps ahead of the midterms. Tennessee has also enacted a new map affecting a majority black Memphis district. The actual news is bigger than one map in one state. The question is whether mid-decade redistricting becomes a normal tool for partisan advantage before voters reach the ballot box. Redistricting sounds procedural, but it shapes whose communities stay together, whose votes are diluted, and which seats are competitive. If you get this information from the right of center sources, you might hear it framed as a lawful map making, a partisan hardball, or a response to a Democratic gerrymander elsewhere. That can distract from the civic concern that constant map changes make representation feel less stable and less accountable to voters. If you're on the other side of the spectrum, left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as voter suppression or racial dilution. That can underplay the state law arguments and the fact that both parties have incentives to use map making aggressively when they can. So, what do we know? What's confirmed? Well, we know that Missouri's map is facing a high court challenge. Louisiana and South Carolina lawmakers are considering new maps as well. Tennessee enacted a new map affecting a majority black Memphis district. And the fights are unfolding before the November midterms. What is not yet confirmed, though, is that Missouri's what the final decision of Missouri's high court outcome is. Louisiana and South Carolina have not necessarily finalized these new maps, and the effect on House control really is also what's at stake. It's uncertain. It's also unclear how future legal challenges will treat minority opportunity districts after recent federal rulings. So, what's the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that redistricting can make representation feel like something done to voters, not by voters. A voter may go to sleep in one district and wake up in another, with different candidates, different campaign messages, and less clarity about who is accountable. Community groups may have to spend time educating residents on new district lines instead of organizing around schools, housing, jobs, or public safety. And the people drawing the maps often face less immediate disruption than people whose political voice is divided or moved. Why does this matter? Well, we can pay attention. And how can we respond? We can pay attention to the Missouri court ruling. We can watch whether Louisiana and South Carolina end up moving their discussions to actually implementing enacted maps. Well, pay attention to whether these challenges focus on state constitutions, federal voting law, racial representation, or partisan power. If courts allow more mid-decade redistricting, other states may treat maps as flexible tools rather than once-a-decade boundaries. If courts block or limit the practice, lawmakers may have less room to redraw seats before the midterms. And if minority opportunity districts are weakened, some communities may have less practical power to elect candidates of their choice. The practical question here is this: does your district still represent your community? Or has your community been divided for someone else's advantage? If your district lines have changed, or if your neighborhood has been split in a way that affects representation, please bring that conversation, bring that experience into the comments, or join us during the live broadcasts. We'd love to hear your input on that. Democracy is easier to defend when people can see the map moving under their feet. A new lawsuit accuses OpenAI's ChatGPT of helping plan a mass shooting. The widow of a man killed in a mass shooting at Florida State University has sued OpenAI. The lawsuit alleges that ChatGPT helped the shooter plan the attack. The Associated Press reports that state officials have said ChatGPT provided information on timing, location, weapons, ammunition, and ways to maximize casualties. Those are allegations and reported official statements. They are not facts proven in court. OpenAI denies responsibility and says it works to prevent harmful uses of its system. The actual news is that this case tests the boundaries between a user's violent intent and a company's responsibility for product design. The facts still need to be proven, but the public question is real. What should AI's system refuse, flag, preserve, or escalate when users seek help with harm? If you get this update from the right of center sources, you might hear it framed as big tech recklessness or censorship hypocrisy, even elitist under accountability. That can really distract from the evidence question. What did the system actually output? What safeguards existed? And what legal duties apply? If you're getting this update from the left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as a need for AI regulation and platform accountability. That can underplay due process, the risk of assigning blame before facts are established, and the challenge of regulating dual-use information. So, what do we know? Well, we know that a lawsuit's been filed against OpenAI by the widow of a Florida State University. And the suit alleges ChatGPT helped plan this attack, but that is not proven in court yet. Florida's Attorney General announced a criminal investigation into OpenAI and ChatGPT in April, and OpenAI denies responsibility for the attack, according to the report. What's not yet confirmed is that the lawsuit alleges the allegations have not yet been proven. The exact content, sequence, and context of the user's ChatGPT interactions have not been independently established in public. And it is unclear whether OpenAI's safeguards were bypassed, failed, or were not triggered. It's also unclear what legal standards courts will apply to AI tools liability in this context. So, what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that a technology safety feature, if proven, can become a real-world safety failure for students, families, and public spaces. Parents and students may carry the daily anxiety of wondering whether everyday tools can be used to plan harm faster than institutions can detect it. Campus workers, counselors, and emergency teams may face more pressure to identify warning signs without clear rules for how AI companies handle dangerous interactions. The people paying the highest costs are families and communities living with violence, while the policy and liability debate happens far above them. So what matters next, and what can we do about it? Well, we can pay attention to the court filings for evidence of the actual conversations. Watch whether OpenAI releases more details about safeguards, refusals, monitoring, or escalation systems. Watch whether lawmakers use this case to push AI safety rules. If the lawsuit uncovers clear, harmful outputs, pressure for AI liability and safety regulations will rise. If evidence is weaker or more complicated, the debate may shift towards mental health, law enforcement, and user responsibility. If courts recognize a duty of care for AI companies, product design and logging practices could change across the industry. The practical question here is not whether AI is good or bad, it's whether powerful tools are being designed with public safety in mind before harm happens. Are you a student, a parent, a teacher, or a campus worker, a developer, or maybe even a safety professional? Share. What does accountability look like to you without turning this into a panic? We'd love to be able to get your input, your perspective on ways that this can be improved as we move into a new society with AI. The goal here is about safer systems and safer communities. General Motors has agreed to pay $12.75 million in civil penalties. California officials say the case involved allegations that GM sold driving data from hundreds of thousands of California motorists to data brokers without proper consent. Officials describe it as the largest penalty to date under the California Consumer Privacy Act. They also describe it as the first data minimization case. The case involved OnStar data, geolocation, and driving behavior info. The actual news is not just that one automaker has paid a fine. It's that a car has become a rolling data device. Driving behavior, location, braking, speed, and trip patterns can become valuable information for brokers, insurers, and other companies. If you're hearing this report on outlets that are right of center, you might hear it framed as California regulation or government overreach, and that can distract from the practical consumer concern. That is that people should know when their movements and driving habits are being monetized. If you're receiving this information from left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as corporate abuse and the need for stronger privacy laws. That can underplay the consumer trade-off around connected to safety features, emergency services, diagnostics, and convenience. So, what is confirmed? What do we know? Well, we know that GM has agreed to a $12.75 million California privacy settlement, and California officials describe it as the largest penalty to date. The case involves allegations about driving data, data brokers, and a lack of adequate consumer consent. California officials have tied the case to data minimization, meaning that companies should not collect or keep more personal information than necessary. What is not yet confirmed, though, is the full impact on individual drivers' insurance in this settlement. It's also unclear how many other automakers or connected car services may face similar enforcement. We also don't know how many consumers understood or consented to the data sharing. The settlement itself does not prove every consumer suffered a specific financial harm. So, what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that a routine drive can become a data record people did not knowingly agree to sell. A driver may later face questions about insurance, privacy, or personal movement patterns without ever realizing a car service was sharing behavior data. A parent, a worker, or caregiver may use a vehicle for sensitive trips, medical visits, school pickups, or second jobs, and that pattern can be more revealing than a search history. The people generating the data often receive the least clarity about who profits from it and where it goes next. So why does all this matter? What can we do about it? Well, let's pay attention. Let's see whether California or other states bring more connected car enforcement actions. We can pay attention to whether automakers simplify consent screens and data sharing choices. We can also watch whether insurers, brokers, and car companies face more scrutiny over driving and driver behavior data. If regulators keep winning these cases, car companies may have to limit collection, improve disclosures, and make outputs easier. If enforcement stays limited, Well, drivers may continue learning after the fact that their vehicles have created a commercial profile. If consumers push back, privacy may become a selling point in the auto market, not just a compliance issue. The practical question about this is, when your car collects data, do you know who gets it and why they get it? Do you also know how to stop it? If you have ever discovered a connected service, an insurance score, or data sharing setting that you did not understand, well, please share it here. We'd love to be able to not only understand your position, but also find new ways on how we can help push back against some of these privacy concerns. Because privacy becomes real when people compare what they thought they agreed to what actually happened. President Trump has nominated David Cummings to lead the Transportation Security Administration. Cummings is a senior vice president at Serco. The agency has recently faced strain from a shutdown, unpaid workers, and long security lines. The TSA affects airport screening, passenger flow, workforce morale, and aviation security management. The actual news here is that this is a leadership story with a practical public service consequence. TSA is visible when people travel. But the deeper issue is workforce stability, security consistency, and trust in crowded public infrastructure. If you're hearing about this report from the right of center sources, you might hear it framed as a restoring competence or discipline or private sector efficiency. And that can distract from the workers' concern. Unpaid or overstretched security staff are part of the safety system, not just a staffing expense. Whereas if you're hearing this from the left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly around privatization concerns or Trump administration appointments. That can underplay the practical need for stable leadership in an agency that millions of travelers rely on. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that Trump has nominated David Cummings to lead the TSA, and he has private sector experience at Serco, according to AP. TSA recently has faced strains tied to a shutdown, unpaid workers, and long security lines. What is not yet confirmed, though, is whether or not Cummings will be confirmed by the Senate. His specific TSA priorities, staffing plans, and operational changes are not fully established. It's also unclear whether the nomination will move quickly or face Senate friction. Finally, it's also unclear how soon travelers or TSA workers would see operational changes. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that TSA leadership decisions show up in everyday travel as time, stress, missed flights, and worker strain. A long security line can mean missed connections, a lost workday, extra childcare costs, or a medical traveler arriving late. For TSA officers, unstable funding or unclear leadership can mean morale problems, staffing gaps, and more pressure in a high-stakes public-facing job. The people blamed for delays are often frontline workers, while the decision that creates staffing and funding stress happened far above the checkpoint. So why does all this matter, and what can we do about it? Well, we can pay attention, watch the Senate confirmation process, and watch whether the nominee addresses staffing, pay continuity, or checkpoint wait times. We can also watch airports that already experience long lines or seasonal travel pressure. If Cummings is confirmed quickly and prioritizes staffing stability, travelers may see smoother operations over time. If confirmation stalls or funding stress returns, TSA may remain vulnerable to long lines and worker burnout. If leadership focuses only on speed without worker support, the system may look efficient until the next disruption exposes the strain. The practical question here is whether airport security can be both safe and humane for travelers and workers. If you travel often, If you work in aviation or have had a screening delay change your day, please share what has happened with you in the comments or join us on the live broadcast. Airport policy becomes real when it costs someone time, money, or a needed trip. Thank you for tuning in. That is today's Spectrum. The pattern across all of these stories is not just conflict. It's friction. Friction in prices, friction in paperwork, friction in courts, friction in maps, friction in technology, friction in privacy, and friction in the system people count on when they travel, work, when they vote, when they seek care, or they manage a household. The question we keep coming back to is, who benefits from the decision? Who carries the cost? And who is missing from the coverage? If one of these stories touches your life directly and your experience is something that you want to share, please feel free to join and drop those into the comments. Or more importantly, join me on the live broadcast every day. The top stories are going to be covered so that we can understand where the facts are and where the people are affected. I'm Jared, you reign, and this is the